Welcome back to the Runner's Paradox podcast. This is where we really try to measure the meaning behind the miles, not just count them.
That's right. And this series, it's all about bringing Ying's book, The Runner's Paradox, to life. We're diving into the core ideas, but also, branching out with the latest research, real stories. And today, today we tackle something pretty universal, often, let's be honest, traumatic for runners. Hitting the wall.
Ah, the wall. Yes.
We're digging into chapter 12. It's titled Hitting the Wall and Breaking Through It. And it's about that moment, that sudden, sometimes violent realization of your limits. It really separates, I think, the strategic runner from one who's just ambitious.
Oh, absolutely. It's so personal when it happens, but almost every long-distance runner knows it. I can still picture it so clearly in my first marathon, the wall. It wasn't this slow fade you sometimes hear about. No, it arrived early, maybe mile 18, and it was just total physiological collapse.
Yeah.
Like 1 minute I'm running, feeling pretty good, following the plan. And the next, my body just completely sputtered out. Everything I'd planned, my belief, even my sense of self as a runner, it just dissolved, became pure survival.
Wow. Mile 18 is early for that kind of shutdown.
It was brutal. And honestly, it completely redefined how I thought about training, racing, everything. Expectations just shattered.
And that moment, that exact point where the script flips from controlled running to just crisis management, that's really the heart of chapter 12, isn't it?
Yeah.
I had a similar, though different experience. Shorter race, not a marathon. Hell, amazing, totally in control, pace felt easy. Until maybe, 300 meters from the finish?
Oh, no. So close.
Right. I could see the finish line. My brain is screaming, go, kick.
Yeah.
But my legs, they just decided, nope, we're done. Like, switch flipped off, completely final.
Ugh, that feeling when the physical reality just completely vetoes the mental command.
Exactly. That's what I mean by the existential fracture. It makes you question everything. All those workouts, the preparation.
Yeah.
Did any of it matter in that moment?
And that's precisely why we're dedicating this conversation to it. We want to really unpack this collapse, not just the obvious physical stuff, the pace dropping, the form going.
The lead legs, yeah.
But also that deeper confrontation.
Yeah.
The limits of your control, that moment where all the planning, all the discipline suddenly feels, maybe irrelevant. And you're forced to totally recalibrate your relationship with effort.
Yeah, and the book frames it around this really big question, which sounds simple, but is actually incredibly profound. What is this wall actually made of?
Right.
Is it just a physical thing, like literally running out of glycogen stores in your muscle?
The empty fuel tank idea.
The classic explanation. Or is it something, softer, but maybe even tougher, like fear? Or the consequences of overtraining? Or maybe just an ego-driven pacing plan finally catching up with you?
It feels like it could be any or all of those.
Exactly. We have to look at both sides of it, the physical and the metaphorical, to really get a handle on how to potentially beat it, or maybe, as the book suggests, outgrow it.
So that's our plan. We'll explore this using Ying's insights from the book, but also weaving in some really interesting cutting-edge research from 2024 and 2025.
Yeah, some fascinating stuff coming out recently.
And just a reminder for everyone listening, this whole exploration is grounded in the runner's paradox. If these ideas resonate, if you're nodding along thinking about your own walls, the book is available for purchase. You can find out more at therunnersparadox.com.
Okay, so let's start by defining this wall. The book really talks about its dual nature.
Yeah, first there's the literal side, the one every runner absolutely dreads.
Right. That classic physical shutdown.
Unmistakable, isn't it? Your legs feel like lead, they just won't respond. Your pace doesn't just slow, it plummets, sometimes by minutes per mile. Your body starts scrambling for energy from anywhere it can, usually unsustainably. The whole system just shifts into survival mode. You go from, hopefully efficient running to this kind of primal stagger.
Yeah, and Ying captures that feeling so well in the book, describing it as being forced to ask yourself, why am I even still moving? Because every single signal from your body is screaming, stop.
Totally. That's the physiological collapse.
Yeah.
Measurable, metabolic.
But then there's the other layer, the metaphorical threshold. And this is where chapter 12 gets really deep, philosophically.
This is where it goes beyond just tired legs.
Exactly. It's where your identity as a runner, the meaning you attach to it, your endurance itself, they all collide.
Yeah.
When you hit that wall, you kind of stop being the agent in charge, the one giving orders to your body.
You become.
You become a witness to your own body's failure. And that sudden, stark loss of control, especially after months of dedicated preparation and belief, that's what creates that existential fracture we talked about.
It's like your body just throws its hands up. look, we're done here. Your spreadsheet goals don't matter right now. This is the non-negotiable limit.
Yeah.
And realizing that, being both the driver who failed and the subject of the failure, it's a really jarring perspective shift, which leads us right into the framework the book uses for understanding limits.
Right. Ying lays out these three intertwined questions. They act like a map for navigating this whole paradox of pushing limits. The first one is key. What are the limits we can actually control?
Things like training load, nutrition, pacing strategy, maybe even mindset to some extent.
Exactly. And how do we manipulate those factors intelligently?
Okay, then on the flip side,
Then the tough one. What are the limits we cannot control? The unavoidable stuff.
genetics maybe,
Age.
underlying health conditions,
Mm-hmm.
just plain bad luck on race day.
All of those. The finite factors. And the question then becomes, how do we respond to those boundaries without just, giving up or letting them crush us?
That's a big one.
Oh,
And the third,
the third question is about wisdom, really. How do we keep pushing our barriers, trying to expand our limits, without just breaking ourselves in the process? How do we aim for progress without causing maladaptation or injury?
progression without destruction. I like that.
Yeah. And this is where some of the new science comes in, giving us really concrete data, particularly about that first category, the limits we potentially can control.
You mentioned biomechanics earlier.
Exactly. Research from 2024 or 2025, it's suggesting that hitting the wall might be way more predictable than we used to think, based on how we're moving much earlier in the race.
So it's not just this sudden catastrophe at mile 20 or 22.
Well, the feeling might be sudden, but the research suggests the foundations for that collapse are being laid and are potentially measurable miles and miles before you actually hit it.
Okay, let's unpack that. You mentioned specifics.
Yeah, 2025 study used IMU's inertial measurement units. Think of them like super sophisticated sensors worn on the body.
Like advanced versions of what's in our watches or phones.
Sort of, but much more precise for measuring movement angles, forces, efficiency, on a really fine-grained level during running.
Okay, and what did they find?
They found that subtle shifts in biomechanics can actually predict who is likely to hit the wall later in a marathon. They looked at metrics like ground contact time, how long your foot stays on the ground, step length, and vertical stiffness.
Vertical stiffness. Okay, that sounds a bit abstract. Why is that important for a runner?
It's basically a measure of how springy you are when you run. Imagine your leg and foot acting like a spring. When you land, you compress it, store elastic energy, and when you push off, it releases that energy.
Okay, like a pogo stick sort of action.
Kind of, yeah. High vertical stiffness means you're doing that efficiently. You're recycling energy well, your ground contact time is probably shorter, and you need less muscular effort just to propel yourself forward.
So when we get tired, that spring gets less springy.
Exactly. The study showed that as runners fatigue, their vertical stiffness tends to drop. They become less efficient, more mushy on landing. They spend more time compressing downwards rather than efficiently bouncing forwards.
And ground contact time probably increases too.
Correct. Both things happen. You spend longer on the ground and your stiffness decreases. This means you have to rely more on brute muscular force to keep moving, which chews through energy much faster and accelerates fatigue, especially glycogen depletion.
Okay, so the IMUs pick up these subtle changes early on. What was the implication? How predictive was it?
This is the really striking part. The model they developed, based purely on these early biomechanical changes, achieved roughly 74% accuracy in predicting significant pace collapse hitting the wall later in the race.
74%. Wow.
Yeah, miles before the runner subjectively felt like they were falling apart.
Okay, that really changes things, doesn't it? If hitting the wall is 74% predictable based on how my body's machinery is functioning way back at mile 10 or 15,
Yep.
Does that mean it's mostly a mechanical inevitability, not, a failure of my courage or mental strength?
That is the absolute core question Chapter 12 forces us towards, especially with this new data. If the way you're moving is inherently unsustainable for that pace over that distance due to fatigue affecting your form, then yeah, the collapse is kind of pre-programmed. The limit is built into that interplay of form, fatigue, running economy, not just your mental grit.
But hang on, if it's 74% predictable, what about the other 26%? Because thinking back to my marathon wall, that mile 18 collapse felt so sudden, so complete, it didn't feel pre-programmed. It felt like hitting a brick wall. Literally, is that 26% where other factors come in?
That's a great question. And I think that 26% represents the beautifully messy reality of human performance. The biomechanics research gives us a powerful understanding of the controllable mechanical limits. It underlines why training running economy, maintaining form through strength work is so critical. But that remaining percentage, that's where things like maybe acute dehydration, sudden muscle cramps, fueling going wrong, or perhaps those more philosophical elements from the book fear, ego, your internal story still play a massive role.
So the wall might manifest physically because of biomechanical breakdown that started earlier,
Right.
but the experience of hitting it, how catastrophic it feels, might still be heavily influenced by those other factors.
Precisely. The physical failure might be brewing, but the conscious collapse often feels like it encompasses everything body and mind shutting down together, which leads us nicely into thinking beyond just fuel tanks.
Yeah, because if the wall is partly pre-programmed mechanically, then the answer isn't just more fuel. It's about resetting that program through adaptation. It's about building resilience.
Exactly. And there's a major 2024 review that actually frames physiological resilience as this emerging fourth dimension of endurance performance.
Fourth dimension. Okay, so we have the classic three.
Right. For years, we focused on VO-max, your engine size, basically. Lactate threshold, how hard you can push before things get really acidic, and running economy, your fuel efficiency.
And we tend to think of those as relatively fixed numbers, right? You get tested, you know your zones, that's your potential.
Yeah, kind of static pillars. This idea of physiological resilience challenges that. It emphasizes the plasticity of those metrics.
Plasticity meaning they can change.
They can change, and they do change. They aren't fixed numbers. They shift over time with training, obviously, but they also degrade significantly under chronic stress, life stress, not just training stress, and they plummet when you're injured or getting sick. Resilience in this context is your body's ability to minimize how much those core metrics suffer when you put it under high load.
High load, like a hard workout, a race, or just a really stressful week at work.
Potentially all of the above. It's about the system's ability to withstand perturbations and maintain function.
So hitting the wall isn't just a simple failure then, it's actually powerful feedback.
Exactly. Your body's basically yelling at you, saying, okay, immediate adaptation is required here, or maybe the way we prepared for this load earlier in the training cycle wasn't sufficient. It's a painful but clear invitation to train smarter, not necessarily just harder.
And that feedback loop, that need for smarter training, points directly to one of the most trainable parts of our limits,
Yeah,
the lactate threshold, or LT.
absolutely. Another 2024 review specifically looked at this, confirming what good coaches have known for a while. Targeted training can effectively delay fatigue by improving that LT.
Okay, let's just quickly define LT again for everyone. It's not just about feeling the burn.
No, it's more precise. It's the intensity level, the pace or heart rate where lactate starts accumulating in your bloodstream faster than your body can clear it out.
And once you cross that line,
Once you go significantly above LT, you enter a state where fatigue mounts really rapidly. You can only sustain that effort for a limited time before the metabolic byproducts, the acidity, force you to slow down dramatically. It's arguably the single best physiological predictor of your sustainable pace for longer endurance events.
so doing things like interval training, tempo runs,
Mm-hmm.
that's not just about getting faster.
It's fundamentally about training your body's ability to clear that lactate, to buffer the acidity, and to produce energy more efficiently at higher intensities. You're essentially pushing that threshold point higher, allowing you to run faster for longer before you hit that metabolic tipping point.
Makes sense.
And this is a crucial point the review highlighted, you absolutely need individualization in how you train. That LT cookie cutter plans don't work optimally.
Why not? If the physiology is similar.
Because the psychological experience varies hugely between runners.
Oh, okay. How does psychology play into lactate threshold?
It comes down to the RPE, the rate of perceived exertion. How hard an effort feels to one runner as they approach their LT can be completely different for another runner, even if their actual physiological numbers, like VO-max or LT pace, are identical.
So one person might feel okay managing the discomfort, while another feels like they're falling apart.
Exactly. Some runners are just mentally better at handling that discomfort, maintaining focus and form even as things get tough internally. Others might experience a really rapid spike in RPE, a feeling of mental detachment, maybe even panic, which leads them to back off pace much sooner, even if physiologically they could handle a bit more.
So the training needs to address both the physical capacity and the runner's mental relationship with that level of discomfort.
That's the ideal scenario, yes.
Mm.
Which brings us back nicely to that duality of limits we talked about. We've covered some controllable ones, form, LT, training structure. But we have to face the other side, too. Ying's second question about the limits we cannot control.
Right, the hard realities.
The finite factors. Your basic genetic blueprint muscle fiber type distribution, inherent heart size, lung capacity, things like that.
Age is a big one too, right?
Absolutely. Maximum aerobic capacity generally declines with age. That's just biology. Then there's inherent injury risk, maybe due to your specific bone structure or biomechanics, or chronic health conditions, some of which people might not even know they have, like subtle heart issues.
Okay, these are the things we can't train away. We can't change our genes or turn back the clock. So how does the book suggest we respond to these limits we can't change?
The advice is really centered on focus. If you obsess over the uncontrollable factors, oh, I don't have the right genes, or I'm getting too old, it creates this negative mental spiral. It just saps the energy you need for the things you can influence.
It becomes paralyzing, shifts your focus from what you can do to what you are, maybe.
Perfectly put. It shifts focus from process to destiny. The empowerment comes from recognizing that while the ultimate ceiling might be fixed, the process of getting closer to it or maintaining your capacity is ongoing. Your effort, how you respond to setbacks, your choices about recovery, nutrition, stress management, those are always within your sphere of influence day to day.
So focus on the controllables.
Exactly. The most resilient runners, mentally and physically, seem to be the ones who understand the boundaries but choose to pour all their energy into optimizing within those boundaries. They focus on their own improvement, their own process, rather than getting bogged down comparing themselves to others who might have different genetic gifts or be at a different life stage.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Let's take a short pause here. Just a reminder, we're deep into unpacking Chapter 12 of The Runner's Paradox. If this conversation about limits, resilience, and outgrowing the wall is hitting home, you can find the full book for purchase and more resources over at therunnersparadox.com.
Right. So we've talked about what the wall is, the science behind it, the different types of limits. How do we actually use this understanding? How do we take that experience of collapse and turn it into something productive, into fuel for growth?
Yeah, how do we train smarter? And this brings us back to that really powerful insight from Yang in the book. You realize you are not only an agent of your body, but subject to your body.
That hits hard.
It does. The wall is this violent interruption of the ego, the part of us that thinks we're in total command. It forces you to acknowledge, okay, I'm the director here trying to execute a plan, but I'm also inhabiting this physical vessel that has its own rules and limits, and sometimes it just breaks.
So the collapse itself, the failure, it actually becomes this ritual of self-recalibration.
I think that's a great way to put it. It forces you to ask hard questions. Was my pacing realistic? Did I neglect strength training, leaving my form vulnerable to breaking down like the research suggests? Was my fueling strategy flawed? The wall is like this unavoidable systems check. Thinking about my own experience, that awful mile 18 wall. It was painful, sure, but reflecting on it afterwards was crucial. It directly led to the smartest changes I ever made in my training.
How so?
I had to embrace controlled limits. I realized just piling on volume wasn't the answer for me. I started integrating serious, dedicated strength work. I focused way more on recovery, actually listening to early fatigue signals instead of just gritting my teeth and pushing through with denial. That collapse forced a level of honesty I didn't have before.
That really highlights the core tension here, doesn't it? When we're in that tough spot, pushing through those last horrible miles or meters, how much of that is genuinely productive limit pushing that will lead to positive adaptation? And how much is just denial, pushing into a state that's actually causing damage or deep fatigue, leading to maladaptation down the road?
It's such a fine line, a razor's edge sometimes. But the book suggests 3 interconnected strategies for navigating this wisely, moving beyond just smashing against the wall towards something more strategic. Awareness, adaptation, and integration.
Okay, let's break those down. Awareness first.
This is about recognizing those early warning signs, the breakpoint markers, before the full collapse happens.
So beyond just the fancy IMU data on biomechanics, this is about tuning into the subjective feelings.
Exactly. That sudden spike in perceived effort, even if your pace hasn't dropped yet. That subtle shortening of your stride you might notice. Or maybe just a shift in your mental state. That toxic negative internal narrative suddenly popping up. Recognizing those as signals.
And casing strategy is a huge part of awareness too, right?
Absolutely. There was a major pacing review in 2024 that had some really compelling findings on this. It showed that runners who successfully used negative splitting, running the second half of the race faster than the first, were significantly less likely to hit the wall at all.
Which makes intuitive sense. You're managing your resources better.
Totally. Negative splitting forces you to be disciplined and controlled early on. You're intentionally conserving energy, holding glycogen in reserve. This means you're far less likely to experience that premature biomechanical breakdown that the research suggests predicts the collapse for so many people. It takes real self-awareness and focus on the long game, not just getting carried away early.
Okay, so awareness is step one. What about adaptation?
Adaptation is about actively using training to shift those limit lines. Not just being aware of where the line is, but intentionally working to redraw it further out, building that resilience we talked about.
And you mentioned a study related to this.
Yeah, a really interesting one from 2025. They took runners through a 20-week program that combined endurance running with strength training.
Okay, what happened?
The results were pretty remarkable. The program significantly improved their running economy, their fuel efficiency, and also their ventilatory thresholds and maximal aerobic speed. So they got fitter and more efficient. But here's the kicker. They achieved these improvements without any significant changes in their fundamental running biomechanics, their gait pattern.
Wait, how does that work? They got more economical and faster, but their form didn't change.
It seems the strength work adapted the body's internal machinery. It wasn't about changing how they looked when they ran, but about strengthening the systems supporting that movement. Better strength endurance and stabilizing muscles, improved nerve signals to recruit muscles, maybe better mitochondrial function to produce energy.
Okay. So the strength work made the existing form more sustainable, more resilient to fatigue.
Exactly. It shows that strength and cross-training aren't just about preventing injuries. They're actually primary tools for boosting running economy and physiological resilience. They help you maintain your pace and form for longer before fatigue starts that downward spiral.
That's a powerful argument for hitting the gym.
Okay, awareness, adaptation. What's the third strategy? Integration. Integration ties it all back to the philosophy in the book. It's about accepting that duality of endurance we keep mentioning. You have to push hard sometimes. Strain is necessary for your body to adapt and get stronger. But you have to simultaneously listen intently to the feedback.
Push and listen.
Right. You push towards the threshold, but you integrate the recovery, the lessons learned, immediately afterwards. It's a continuous cycle, not just hammering away blindly.
This holistic approach helps avoid what the book refers to as collapse being just an artifact of growth, something that shows you where this system is brittle. But as we talk about integrating strain and recovery, there's also a crucial warning sign we need to touch on related to the potential hidden hazards of very high volume training over the long term.
Yeah, we need to acknowledge that pushing limits, especially over decades, isn't always entirely benign. There can be risks.
Absolutely. That 2025 review on marathon pathophysiology, the study of disease processes related to marathon running, brought up a really critical finding. It noted a correlation between lifetime high-volume endurance training.
We're talking decades of serious mileage here.
Yes, decades of intense, sustained effort, and a higher incidence of atrial fibrillation, particularly in male athletes.
Atrial fibrillation, AFib. That's a serious heart rhythm issue. Can you explain briefly what it is and why extreme endurance training might be linked to it for some people?
Sure. AFib is basically an irregular and often very rapid heart rhythm that originates in the upper chambers, the atria. It can lead to poor blood flow, increase the risk of stroke, and cause other problems. The proposed link to extreme long-term endurance training is complex, but the main hypothesis involves cardiac remodeling.
The heart changing shape and structure.
Yes. Now, some cardiac remodeling from exercise is good. The heart muscle gets stronger. The chambers might enlarge slightly to pump more blood efficiently. That's the athlete's heart. But the theory is that in some individuals, the extreme stress of decades of high-volume training might lead to inflammation, stretching, and eventually scarring or fibrosis in the atrial tissue.
And that scarring interferes with the heart's electrical system.
That's the idea. The scar tissue can disrupt the normal electrical pathways that control the heartbeat, creating circuits that allow for the chaotic rhythm of AFib. It's definitely not something that happens to everyone. Genetics likely play a role, but it's a significant enough correlation that it forces us to think beyond just performance.
It shifts the question from just, can I run faster or longer, to, is this volume and intensity sustainable and healthy for my heart over the very long term?
Precisely. It underscores that pushing barriers always lives right next door to potential hazards. It demands wisdom, self-awareness, and maybe regular check-ins with healthcare professionals, not just blind force or obsession with volume.
So the goal really isn't about smashing through the wall with brute force, hoping you don't break something important.
No, and that leads perfectly to Ying's core ethos. That really sums up the whole chapter. You don't break the wall by smashing through it, you outgrow it.
Outgrow it. I love that.
Yeah, outgrowing it means finding that balance between pursuit and respect, between strain and listening carefully, between pushing for growth and actively avoiding self-destruction.
It implies building a body and maybe a mindset that's so resilient, so well adapted, that the point where the wall used to show up, whether it was mile 18 for me or 300 meters from the finish for you, just keeps receding further and further back, until maybe for your target race distance, it's not really a primary threat anymore.
Exactly. The wall, viewed this way, isn't just a barrier, it's like a camera, taking a snapshot of your current limitation.
A limitation that's maybe destined to change if you respond to that snapshot wisely.
That's the hope. That's the smarter path.
Okay, as we wrap up this deep dive into Chapter 12, I think the biggest takeaway is that hitting the wall, while painful, is actually loaded with essential feedback.
Yeah, feedback about your whole system, physiological, biomechanical, psychological. It tells you about the current capacity and, crucially, the sustainability of what you're doing. It's a powerful tool for self-assessment if you use it right.
It can guide you towards a healthier mindset and definitely a smarter training process.
Absolutely. So we want to leave you, the listener, with 5 reflective questions that come directly from the book. These are great things to mull over, maybe on your next easy run or even during some downtime. Let them settle.
Okay, question 1. When was the last time you really pushed past what felt like your absolute limit? And looking back now with a bit of distance, should you have? Was that effort genuinely productive, helping you adapt, or was it maybe just denial causing more harm than good?
Good one. Second, what are the very early signs your body gives you before the wall truly appears? Forget the dramatic collapse itself. Can you identify more subtle cues, tiny pace drops, a slight change in how your foot strikes, or even just that first negative thought popping into your head? What are your specific early markers?
Third, do you trust yourself only to keep going no matter what? Or do you also trust yourself to make the smart decision to stop or back off when necessary? This gets at that balance of control and respect we talked about. Knowing when persistence is right and when listening to a hard limit is the truly resilient move for the long haul.
Fourth, what would it actually look like in practice for you to consciously train towards resilience, not just towards resistance or toughness? Think about incorporating things like strength work, mobility, dedicated recovery, maybe even stress management, not as optional add-ons, but as fundamental parts of building your endurance engine.
And finally, fifth, think outside of running for a moment. Where else in your life, maybe your career, relationships, or creative project, have you hit a wall? And what did that experience reveal to you about perhaps flawed assumptions you held or processes that were maybe more brittle than you realized?
Those are powerful questions. They really encapsulate why The Runner's Paradox is such a valuable read, going so much deeper than just training plans.
Definitely. And if you want to explore this framework further and Ying's whole philosophical journey, the book is available for purchase. You can find all the info and more resources at therunnersparadox.com.
So next time on the podcast, we're shifting gears a bit. We move away from the stress of hitting limits and into the absolutely vital yet often misunderstood world of restoration.
Oh, recovery.
Chapter 13 explores the paradox of recovery. It reframes it not just as passive rest sitting on the couch, but as an active process of recalibrating your identity, your pace, your purpose as a runner. It's essential for anyone who, maybe subconsciously, still thinks of recovery as weakness.
Looking forward to that one. Make sure you subscribe to the Runner's Paradox podcast so you don't miss it. And hey, if this conversation about hitting the wall resonated, if you know someone who's struggling with their limits or trying to find the wisdom in their running struggles, please share this with them.
Yeah, or maybe save this conversation for your own next long run. Could be interesting to tune into your body's signals with these ideas in mind.
Great idea. Thanks so much for tuning in today.
Thank you.
Us run.